Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. According to our mission to make authentic Islamic knowledge accessible for everyone who is seeking it, the International Open University has educated hundreds of thousands of students from all parts of the world over the last 10 years. Towards that end, IOU has translated our bachelor's degree in Islamic studies from English into Russian and Urdu. And in 2016, with the help of your generous donations and tremendous efforts on the part of our translators, we were able to translate the first 6 semesters, that's the first 3 years, of the BAIS program into Bahasa, the native language of Indonesia.
Alhamdulillah, sejak dibukanya program Sarjana Studi Islam dengan Bahasa Indonesia pada bulan Februari 2017, lebih dari 350 mahasiswa telah bergabung dan menuai pahala menuntut ilmu. Mereka tersebar di Indonesia, mulai dari Takengon Aceh di barat sampai Kupang, Nusa Tenggara Timur di timur. Bahkan ada juga yang tinggal di luar negeri seperti Malaysia, Saudi Arabia, dan Jerman. Apakah Anda ingin membantu semua mahasiswa ini menyelesaikan program sarjananya dan juga jutaan orang lainnya yang akan bergabung? Ya, donasikan sebagian harta Anda untuk menyelesaikan terjemah 2 semester terakhir program ini ke dalam bahasa Indonesia. Materi terjemah meliputi 12 mata kuliah, 35 jam video kuliah, dan teks sebanyak 9.288 halaman.
The Prophet ﷺ informed us that anyone who guides others to do good gets the same reward as the one who does good. Can we afford to let this priceless opportunity go? Donate now by clicking on the link below and share this video with your family and friends. Barakallahu fikum. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Innal hamdalillah nahmaduhu wa nasta'inuhu wa nastaghfiruh wa natubu ilaihi wa na'udzu billahi min shururi anfusina min sayyiati a'malina may yahdihillahu fala mudilla lahu wa may yudlil fala hadiya lahu. Asyhadu an la ilaha illallah wahdahu la syarika lahu wa asyhadu anna Muhammadan abduhu wa rasuluh. Allahumma shalli wa sallim ala nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa ashabihi ajma'in. Alhamdulillah, we join in the IOU Indonesia live talk, and tonight we will have Dr Nissar Ahmad Yatoo, which is who is our head of department Islamic economic banking and finance in International Open University. First of all, thank you very much for Dr Nissar who accepting our invitation to give special lecture about the Islamic banking and finance tonight. This live talk online, it will be broadcasted through YouTube and Facebook Live. And also a few weeks ago, your college, Dr. Sultan Emir Hidayat, also gave the lecture through IOU Global. Yes. And we know that Dr. Sultan is also IOU lecturer and also director of Indonesian National Committee of Sharia Economic and Finance. So it will be a great opportunity for us among IOU families. We have one of the Indonesian influential figure in economic Sharia. And okay, as we know that Indonesia is the largest Muslim countries, but the Sharia market share within the national financial asset is only about 8%. So it's very little. And the Islamic banking itself is already rapidly developed globally, not only in the Muslim countries, but also in the Western world, like in Europe and also in Africa. And we believe as Muslim that Islam gives the boundaries what are halal and haram in economic dealings, and we should know and comply with that. So Allah Subhanahu wa Taala says in the Surat Al-Baqarah, chapter verse number 275, wa ahlallahu al-bay'a wa harrama riba, that Allah has permitted trading and forbid usury. Even Allah has declared that war to the one who take riba, right? So we believe that Allah has decreed His Sharia law, including how we implement the economic transaction according to the Quran and Sunnah. This will bring justice and prosperity among us. So before us, I will introduce our our speaker tonight. So this is the CV of Dr. Nissar. All right. So Dr. Nissar is faculty head of Islamic of Department of Islamic Economic, Banking and Finance (IOU). He also a member of International Council of Islamic Finance Educators and advisor of some Islamic companies in Somaliland, Philippines, and Ethiopia, and also he is also coordinator of foreign collaboration and student recruitment in Faculty of Economic and Business in Airlangga University. This is we know the one of the well-known and reputable university in Indonesia, in Surabaya. And he also editor of the IOU Journal of Islamic Science and reviewer other Islamic journal. His education is from bachelor and master from University of Kashmir, and he took the PhD in Islamic finance in Pondicherry University in India. So before he joined in IOU, he became a lecturer in the Department of Education, Government of Jammu and Kashmir, and also in the Pondicherry University as doctoral research fellow and teaching assistant. Then now start from 2016. Now he's a Department of Islamic Economic, Banking and Finance IOU as department head and assistant professor. So Dr. Nissar has many publications. I cannot say one by one.
Yes, you can leave it now. It is enough.
All right. All right. So okay, let's give the session to Dr. Nissar because Dr. Nissar only has time around 40 minutes and another 5 to 10 minutes for question and answer session. So please welcome Dr. Nissar. Time is yours, sir.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. As-salatu was-salam ala rasulil kareem wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajmain. So I welcome you all in this session. It is a brief session and the basic introduction of Islamic banking and finance. Actually, considering the stats of IOU Basha department in Indonesia, Basha campus, right? So we have recently launched it, and I thought the new students will be joining from this country, and I took to the very basics of Islamic banking and finance. So this session is a welcome session more than a teaching and learning session, right? So through this session, I would like to welcome all the students, all the potential students from the country Indonesia who are joining IOU in different departments, in different programs. So I am very thankful to the IOU Students Committee in Indonesia who are governing this Basha campus for inviting me for this lecture in the campus. So I will not give myself because I have been already introduced by Brother Didik, and I will directly go to my presentation. So my presentation is all about, and when we see this, the basics of Islamic banking, what I have chosen the title of the presentation. So it looks very simple, and of course it should be simple because this session is for the students who are very new to the field of Islamic banking and finance, right? So you must have gone through many reports, many books, many what we say reviews which come on regular basis from different institutions around the world for this Islamic banking and finance. So what is the present status and how it is going in the different countries around the world. So I will not go to that statics. So I'm just here to give a short lecture, a short discussion on the basics of Islamic banking and finance. Because when we see the present trend of Islamic banking and finance around the world, actually people as academicians, or we may say the researchers, we may say the professionals in the field of Islamic bank and finance, they are actually lost in numbers. So what is the number of Islamic banks around the world? So what is the present number of Islamic banks in a particular country, right? So what is the number of Islamic finance and products we have in different countries, right? So actually everyone is somehow involved in the statics of Islamic banking and finance. And whenever you see the lecture on Islamic banking and finance, so hardly there will be anyone who will come to the basics, what Islamic banking and finance is all about. And for me, as an academician or researcher or the teacher in Islamic banking and finance, so what I can conclude with my experience of 10 years in this field. So actually Islamic banking and finance, I will say it is an integral part of Islam, and it should be practiced by every Muslim, irrespective of the system he is in, irrespective of the country he is in, right? Because it deals with the way of life, means the way of life in terms of economics or in terms of transactions, trade, whatever trade we do on daily basis, right? So actually, what is my experience that in 90% of the cases around the world, so we are sometimes unnecessary in these transactions with banking and finance, right? So at every point of time, we should remember actually the basic teaching of Islam. So what Islam teaches about the different aspects of life. So in which what we see this dain, or we say mamalat, is one of the major aspects which we have to face, right? And when we see this about Islamic banking and finance, so it is actually the banking and finance which is based on the Sharia law, and we all know that the source of our Sharia means Islamic law is Quran and Sunnah, means the tradition of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And if we see in Quran, we have more than 80 verses in the Quran, so which become the primary source of this Islamic banking and finance, or in broader perspective, we can say the Islamic economics. And out of these 80 verses, the one ayah in the Quran, which is the longest verse, and which is related directly or sometimes indirectly to the subject of business and economics. And it is in Surah Baqarah, verse number 282, right? Which we called as Ayatul Dan, right? So these are the number 80 verses, more than 80 verses are related to business or economics, we say. And interest is one of the main topics which is mentioned in 12 verses in the Quran, right? And also there are numerous evidences from Sunnah related to severity of interest, its definition and prohibitions, right? And based on this concept, so when we see this, based on this interest, so based on this interest related thing, we sometimes call Islamic banking as interest free banking or interest free finance, because interest is the major item which is discussed by Sharia in Quran as well as Sunnah, right? In addition to the other prohibited items. But when we see Islamic banking as a whole, so it is actually the group of prohibitions we are implementing in banking and businesses. So what are the prohibited things? So what are not encouraged by Quran and Sunnah? So we implement those things in banking and finance, and we call it as Islamic banking and finance. And in addition to that, when we see the prohibitions, so Riba I discussed the first, means the interest item. Then in addition to it, there are some other prohibitions which we called as Garar, Maisir, or unlawful trade, or money trading, right? So these are the prohibitions which we have. And when we completely implement all these prohibitions in our banking sector or banking system, we call it as Islamic banking and finance. And if we eliminate only the riba item, and we call it as interest-free finance, right? So you can see the banks around the world. So they may be interest-free, but somehow they are actually involved in other four prohibitions, right? So we cannot call them as Sharia banking or financial institutions, or we cannot call them Islamic financial institutions. So we can simply call them as interest-free finance, right? Or interest-free banking, right? So when we see the prohibitions which we have, so these are riba, garar, maisir, unlawful trade, and money trading. So which I will explain very briefly in the coming slides. So when we see the riba, so riba is actually an Arabic term, right? When we see the riba is an Arabic term, and it is used for actually to translate the word interest, right? So in so when we translate this Arabic word riba, we call it as interest. And in simplest term, it is an excess or premium charged on money lent, right? So what we call the interest in banking, or we can define it as the excess, which can be this can be in terms of the quality or quantity. So if you are exceeding in the quality while giving back, or you are exceeding in the quantity, or in terms of tangible things or intangible benefits, right? In addition to the basic or principal amount. So we say that there is existence of riba in a particular transaction, right? And we have different ways of classification of this riba, and we have mainly two types of riba. One is riba ul bayu, or which we call as riba in trade transactions, and second is riba ul dain, or riba in loan transactions, right? And when we see the second classification, riba ul dain or riba in loan transactions, so this is the main concern of banking and finance in the present scenario, in the present world scenario, to how to eliminate this riba in the loan transactions. But for the sake of explanation, we will explain all the four here, right? And when we see this, the first type is riba ul bayu, or we call riba in trade transactions. So we further classify this kind of riba in two. One is riba al nasiya, and second is riba al fadl. And we classify riba al duyun on another again in the two categories. One is riba al qard, and second is riba al jahiliya, right? So when we see this riba al nasiya or riba of delay, so this is charged based on the deferment of completion of exchange. So when we come into trade, right, and we are exchanging some goods and we make the deferment of changes. So the deferment of deferment of exchange is not allowed in every transaction, right? For example, if we exchange money with some commodity, so that is okay. But when we exchange money with money, means if there is deferment, so it is riba, right? So we have two conditions. One is equal to equal, and second is yadan by yad, means on spot. So these are two conditions which we have to fulfill in a transaction, right? Means the exchange should be equal to equal when we are actually trading in the same types of commodities. For example, gold and gold, right? So it should be equal to equal, and it should be on spot, right? For example, I have given the example here: 5 kg of gold is exchanged with another 5 kg of gold, right? So if we are deferring the exchange, means person A is giving now and another person is giving on after 2 days, right? Means there is deferment of this exchange, right? So there is prolonged period, means the riba is there, right? So this is one kind of riba. So I will take the questions later if there is any doubt in any mind, right? So I will take the questions later. So this is for the example here I have given. And second is riba al fadl. So riba by way of excess, right? Sorry, this is actually the wrong spelling here. It is excess. Excess means in addition, right? So excuse me for this spelling. So it arises when there is an additional quantity or inequality in the exchange of goods. For example, you are exchanging 5 grams of gold with 6 grams of gold, right? So this is excess, right? 1 gram is excess. So this is actually the riba al fadl. And the third kind is riba al qard, so which is mainly in the banking transactions nowadays. So when we take loans from banks, so any predetermined benefit for the owner of the debt stated in the contract which the debtor needs to fulfill, right? So this we called as riba al qard, and this form of riba could be viewed in the loan contracts, right, in conventional banks. And the last classification is riba al jahiliya. So a form of interest which is charged above the original debt as a penalty to the debtor due to his inability to service the loan repayment within the time agreed, right? So, for example, if we see the credit card situations right now, so we have to pay the bill in 1 month or 50 days, whatever is there, right? So, if we are delaying, we are extending our payment period, means we are not able to pay within the time, so there could be some penalty. So that we called as riba al jahiliya, right? So these are the four main categories of riba which we could have in the business scenario, right, around the world. And the last two which I discussed, actually these are the main two types of riba interest which we have in the conventional banking and finance, right? So in addition to so when we see this about this interest, how severe it is, right? So you must have gone through different hadiths, different uh, um, uh, hadith about this this interest, right? The severity, punishment, right? So I will take here to a practical example, stating about how severe the riba is, right? So when we see in 2000, the Nigerian president of that time in G Summit, so he discussed about, he mentioned about the severity of interest, this interest, or we can say the riba. So by mentioning the example of their borrowings in 1985, right? So he said that all that what we had borrowed up to 1985 to 1986 was around $5 billion, and we have paid about 16 billions till 2000, means for 14 years. And yet we are still being told that we owe about 28 billion. So the basic amount was 5 billion, and they have paid 16 billion, and they are yet to pay 28 billion, right? And that 28 billion came about because of the injustice in the foreign creditors' interest rates. So if you ask me what is the wrong thing in the world, I will say it is the compound interest. So this is a statement of the president of Nigeria in 2000, right? So it is a very recent statement, only 2 decades ago, right? This is actually, I put the example as the severity of interest, right? Apart from the what is discussed, what we have been taught by Quran and Sunnah about the interest, right? So this is the practical example of the recent, right? Means the last century only. And when we see, in addition to this riba, so in Islamic banking we have other prohibitions. Another is gharar, so which we call as ambiguity or uncertainty. So it is actually composition of risk, fraud, uncertainty, or hazards that might lead to destruction or loss in a business. And it refers to the sale of probable items whose existence or characteristics are not certain, right? So there is ambiguity, there is risk of loss, right? So wherever there is ambiguity, uncertainty, and there is risk of loss, we call these transactions are having the gharar, right? Means uncertainty is there, and the lack of information and knowledge of the ultimate outcome of a transaction, of or an whatever this trade or transaction we are doing. So when we are not certain about the ultimate outcome, what will be the outcome, means we say that there is uncertainty. And gharar in general is actually the lack of transparency in business or transaction, or deception which we do in the transactions, right? Or selling what we do not have, and ignorance on the aspects, different aspects of transaction or the commodity we are trading, and unspecified price and unspecified dates. So whatever points, so these are examples. So if there is anything you find in any transaction, means there is involvement of gharar in that transaction. And when we see the gharar, we cannot eliminate this gharar totally. And we have actually gharar in of different types: acceptable gharar and or we can say avoidable gharar, right? So when we see the two main kinds of gharar, one is gharar fahish, means major uncertainty. So uncertainty which is so great that it becomes unacceptable, right? So we cannot accept it. For example, sale of non-existing objects, sale of object that is unable to be delivered. For example, if you must have gone through the various ahadith about it. For example, you cannot sell a camel in the womb of his mother, right? Right. So that is the thing. Or we cannot sell the crop which is not yet, which is in the flowering season, or which is not yet ready for the cultivation, right? So that is actually the gharar or an uncertainty in the things. And when we see the gharar yasir, means minor uncertainty. So uncertainty which is considered a normal phenomenon in the market, means without risk. So there is not any investment without risk. So some risks we cannot actually measure, and some risks we can measure, but we cannot avoid. So all the measurable risks which we cannot avoid, so those we call it minor uncertainties, right? And some risks which we cannot even measure, so we call them as major uncertainties, right? So they come in the first category of garar, right? And this second category means garar yasir, minor uncertainties accepted by Sharia, as it would be practically impossible to eradicate it from the market. So we cannot eliminate risk totally from the market, right? So we have to take the risk to some extent, so that we called as minor uncertainty. And when we see the third prohibition is actually Maisir, and gambling is actually example of Maisir. So Maisir, actually, when we see the literal meaning of Maisir, it is actually earning money easily without making any efforts. And gambling is the common kind of Maisir we have. So we could have some other kinds of Maisir also, but the gambling is a common Maisir. So that is why we actually use gambling and Maisir together. But Maisir is the word which we use for those transactions, for those activities in which we earn money without any efforts, without any investments, without taking any risks, right? So that is so this is actually Maisir, but the gambling is a kind of Maisir in which you can earn money easily, and also you can lose money easily. But if you earn it without any efforts, right? So that is the gambling. So this is also prohibited in Islam. So this is the third prohibition in Islamic banking and finance. And so other prohibitions which I have mentioned here are actually the unlawful trade. Means, for example, we cannot trade in some prohibited items like pork or some prostitutions, right? Or some things which are injurious to health, right? So these are the unlawful trade. And money trading means we simply buy and sell, exchange money for the purpose of earning, right? So means earning from the foreign exchange market. So without having the intention of this making the a real transaction in the this foreign exchange, for example. So if a traveler is there, he has to or she has to buy dollars, so that is okay from his or her currency, whichever he or she is having. But when we buy dollars to earn, with the intention that the price of the dollar will increase and I will earn the money, so that is the money trading, or we can say the earning from exchange rates, right? So these are the 5 main prohibitions which we have in Islamic banking and finance. And based on these prohibitions, so we have certain products and services which have been developed by different institutions in collaboration with different Islamic scholars, right, for the last 5-6 decades around the world. So which we called as evolution of Islamic banking and finance, right? So in each and every Islamic banking and finance product, so we consider these 5 prohibitions which I have mentioned, and based on these prohibitions, so Islamic banking and finance sector has developed certain products and services, and which are classified in 4 main categories. So one category is the category of those products and services which are sale-based products and services, and second category is the fee-based, and third is partnership-based, and fourth is lease-based. And some other arrangements which do not fall in any of the 4 categories, we write them as others, right? So these are the 4 main categories. So sale-based transactions means in which we come directly with the sale of this trade, this goods and services. So we have different products and services in that: Murabba, cost plus financing, Istisna, Salam, Tabaruk, urban earnest money, or Ina, purchase and sale back, and Sarf, currency exchange, right? So these are sale-based transactions which we have in Islamic bank and finance, and partnership-based are the 2 there. There are mainly 2 partnership-based products. One is Mudarabba, which is based on profit and loss sharing, and Musharaka, which is again based on profit and loss sharing. So that is why we call them as profit and loss sharing. So I could not explain each and every product and service here, right? Because it is a long topic, and we have the session for 40 to 45 minutes, including the questions and answers, right? So I have just put this, and once you enroll in any of the courses which have under the Department of Islamic Economics and Banking and Finance, so you can go through these products and services in detail. And the third category, which is lease based, so ijara leasing, and second is leasing followed by sale, hire purchase, and simple leasing, right? And sometimes in conventional finance we have the operational lease and financial lease. So how those are different from the ijara, so that will be explained in the main course, inshallah. And when we see the fee based the products and services, we have wadia, means safekeeping, and wakala is the agency contract, right? And the others are like qard, means the qard hasana, we get interest free loan. Kafala, we have hiba, gift, ibra, rebate, right? So these are actually the alternatives to the conventional banking and finance arrangements, right? So with this, I have just given you the basics. So what is the basic funda of Islamic bank and finance, and on what fundamentals the Islamic banking and finance sector exists around the world right now, right? So I would like to welcome you all. If you have any questions, any queries, right? So you can ask directly questions, because I put more time on the question and queries, because interactive sessions help more than when we deliver from a single end, right? So I welcome you all with the questions and queries.
All right. We'll give time for question. Go ahead. If you have any question, you can put it in the comment, either in Facebook or YouTube comment. One question from myself, Dr. Nissar. What about the insurance?
Insurance.
Yes.
So actually, insurance is a different sector than banking and finance, and we call the alternative to insurance in Islam is the takaful, right? So when we see in insurance, we have the two kinds of things. One is the gharar, and second is the interest, right? For example, we have two main kinds of interest around us at presently. Means one we called as life insurance, and second we called as general insurance, right? So in general insurance we have different policies. So those insurance are purely for the risk cover, right? So we just sell our risks for 1 year on a premium, so that we call it general insurance, right? So in that situation, actually the company which is doing the insurance, they take the risk, so which we call it gharar, right? So sometimes those risks could be higher. So that is the one actually objection to the insurance. And second objection is in terms of when we take the insurance as the investment policy, in terms of what we see the life insurance policies. So we have to give premium for 5 years, 6 years, right? And after 6 years, you will get back the amount, or before that, if something happens to you, then you will get that amount, right? So there is a condition that you will get back the amount on happening of the event, right? So if the event will not happen, for example, event of what we see the death or some health problem, right? So you will be paid at last when the policy will mature, right? So in that situation, there is interest involved in it, right? So when we have these two things involved in it, right? So we call that it is not Sharia compliant, because these are the two main elements which are involved in the conventional insurance. And for that, Islamic banking and finance sector has alternative available that we called as takaful, right? And it operates based on different models like Wakaf model, etc., right? So that is a long discussion.
All right. So thank you very much for your explanation. One question from brother Ahmad Faisal about the bank. So some of the Indonesian conventional bank, they have Syariah bank as a business unit. So this is not a separate bank, but it is like a business unit under the conventional bank. So what do you think about that?
Yes, actually, when we see the business unit and the conventional bank, if some bank has this Sharia banking window, right? So when we see for you as a customer, as a client, right? So there is not any objection in that because you are dealing with the bank as per the Sharia principles. Means there is no interest, there is profit and loss sharing agreement, right? So you are dealing with that. So you are not actually you should not bother about what are the actually the basic earnings of the bank, in which activity the bank is involved. So actually you have to bother about your transaction. So when whether you are doing the transactions as per the teachings of Islam or not. So if there is not any involvement of interest in your transaction, so you are safe to do banking with them.
All right. So the conclusion is it is okay, right, to have a dealing with the Sharia bank which under business unit of some conventional bank, something like that, sir.
Yes, as a client, you don't have any problem. So if you are dealing with the bank without any interest, so that is not an issue. If it is a conventional bank or it is an Islamic bank, right?
All right. So, okay. Another question from Brother Zul Fadli in the private chat about the concept value of money, time value of money. The money in the present, not the same as future. So this is about the inflation. So is it something against the Islamic law?
Yes, actually, this concept of fiat money is there right now because when we talk of the money in history, means before centuries it was in the real commodities, but now it is a simple paper, right? So there is some objection from some scholars on it, right? So if we consider time value of this fiat money, right? So we should not have any issue of this what we say this interest, right? But majority of scholars are not of the same opinion, and they treat paper money as money this as same as the gold money and silver money in kind of transactions, right? So that is
All right.
so whatever bank is giving, they are giving interest. So it is nominated interest. So it is not the depreciation. So whether the amount will this currency will depreciate or appreciate. So you have a fixed kind of interest, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's right, sir. Okay, thank you very much. Another question from I don't know, it's brother or sister, Ifha. What about if we have credit? I mean, maybe loan. He means loan. We have a loan stuff like laptop or mobile phone, something. Is it okay? Means this is not clear. Means that this is an interest-free loan or with a loan with interest.
Yes, actually,
Maybe you can explain about the loan scheme which is lawful by Sharia.
yes, we have certain loan schemes sponsored by the government or sponsored by some agencies or organizations, right, for the social benefits, right? So in those schemes, actually, we don't find any this kind of interest or this intention of earning behind, right? So if it is that kind of loan, right, given by some organization, so that is actually to promote the education, what we call the educational loans in the different countries. But there are certain percentage of interest in that, right? So this is actually the ultimate thing. So when there is when you don't have any option, right, then you can go for that. But it is not recommended, right? So take loans on these things. Because sometimes you are taking the loan on the necessity, right? So without which you cannot actually live the normal life, right? So in those situations, so you are allowed to take up to the extent where you can fulfill your basic needs, right?
Yeah, yes, I think
But it's not recommended, right? So take these loans because there is still a percentage of interest in that, right? So it is in extreme situations you can go for this.
Yeah. Normally for the staff loan in the Sharia banking, they will give scheme of murabahah, right? Like
Yes, Sharia
getting
banking actually. So the sister asked the question generally, the loan on laptop or this. So that is why I discussed it in the conventional aspect, right? So when we see this in Sharia banking, there is an alternative which we call as muraba, cost plus financing, right? So that
right,
we
yeah,
can take. Yes,
the cost plus the margin.
yes, yes.
So what one question from the our IOU admin? What about Rahan? How is the Rahan based on the Sharia?
What is Rahan?
Rahan. Rahan is kind of like what you call it, pegadaian, yeah.
Oh, pawn broking, right?
Rohan, yes, Rohan.
So we call it pawn broking, right? Actually, this is so it could be the Sharia compliant or it could not be Sharia compliant. So it depends upon the person who is involved in it, right? So on what this arrangement he is lending to you. So it is actually a personal lender and he takes the mortgage to lend the money, right? So if he's just taking a mortgage and lending money to you, so there is not an issue. So but if he's charging this interest, right? So interest is involved, right? So it varies from person to person who is involved in it. So it is not a formal sector of lending.
Mhm, mhm. Okay. A question from Brother Agung. It's I think it's already answered about the Islamic bank, about the Sharia bank. So we move to the other question from Sister Ira about the e-money. It is happening right now. So the virtual money, which is
Yes,
stored in the mobile phone application or maybe in the card, something like that.
yes.
What about that?
So e-money is actually the same as the paper money we have, right? So paper money is backed by something. Likewise, e-money is backed by something. So if it is actually registered with some the regulated institution, right? So it is same as the paper money. So the e-money which we have, right?
Mhm. So it is okay, right, sir?
So
So to use
if
this
there is not
e-money.
if it is properly regulated as our paper money is regulated by central banks in different countries. So if it is regulated, so there is not any issue in the e-money.
Mhm. And if someone asking about the Bitcoin, what is your thinking about the
Yes,
Bitcoin?
Bitcoin is actually it. There is the opinion of scholars differently on this, right? So, for example, in some countries, Bitcoin has been approved as a kind of currency by the government, right? So, in those countries, the scholars say that it is allowed there to trade in the Bitcoin, and in certain countries, the trading in Bitcoin is actually what we say the black money, right? So it is not actually regulated or approved by the concerned government, right? In that case, and in Bitcoin, we have the major uncertainty involved because no one is regulating this money, right? So,
Mhm.
so it is better to be actually keep away from this Bitcoin.
So avoid the Bitcoin because the speculation or the
Yes,
horror is
speculation, wherever is there.
very very big. I mean, it's a very large there. Hmm. Okay, the question from the sister Humaira about the bank Sharia bank, which is using the system of profit sharing, but we have to pay the administration fee. Is it
Yes,
okay?
yes, profit sharing is there, and second is administration fee. So actually, we have this is a controversial issue right now in the banking sector, the administration fee. Some institutions charge administration fee as the percentage on the amount they lend or you are trading with them, right? And scholars say that amount is actually a kind of riba. But if the administration fee is based on the transaction, administration fee per transaction, so irrespective of the amount of the transaction, right? So there is not any objection, right?
Right. So no
So
objection about
so
the.
so some banks take actually administration cost, but as a fixed percentage of the amount, and
Mhm,
actually and scholars say that it's a kind of interest involved in it. But if the
mhm,
administration cost is per transaction, so irrespective of the transaction amount of transaction, right? So means you
mhm,
are charging $100 per transaction, $50 per transaction as, for example, the administrative fee, right? So there is not an objection. For example, if you see administration fee is 10%, means there is objection, right? So it's kind of interest.
All right. So I can conclude that if the administration fee is like a fixed rate, so
Yes.
either we take loan
one is
$10 or $1,000, it's the same,
one is
right?
fixed rate per transaction, right? So if it
Per
is fixed rate per transaction, so there is not any issue in that. If it is fixed rate on the amount, right? For example, 10% of the amount is administrative fee, or 5% of the amount, right? So that is the issue.
So that is just what you get interest, but in the different name only.
Yes, yes.
Okay. So okay, okay, question from the masjid. Okay, this is maybe one from Facebook. Masjid Nur, from the Sharia bank around the world, which country is fully implementing the Islamic banking principle? In Indonesia, we often heard that the Sharia bank is not fully fully compliant with the Islamic principle, because if the business is not profitable, we still have to pay the loan.
Yes.
Which country?
So actually, when we see this implementation of business principles based on the countries, and we can say that there is not any country around the world which implement fully it, but there are institutions, right? So in every country, some institutions implement and some do not implement, right? So, but we cannot actually call any country as full-fledged Islamic banking and finance is there, right?
Even Saudi Arabia, maybe, like
in Saudi Arabia, right? So actually, what I have read in this literature, that the biggest bank in Saudi Arabia is actually the conventional bank, right?
Conventional. Even a conventional bank is also exists there in Saudi Arabia.
It is the biggest bank there. The biggest among the banks is conventional, right?
Okay. Okay. So.
Okay.
But what I know is that the Al Rajhi Bank is a Sharia, but it is a private banks, not a state owned bank.
Yes, yes.
Al Rajhi. Okay. Any other question from brothers or sisters? Do you still have time, sir? I mean, maybe.
Let's continue a few more minutes if you have any question.
All right. So in the private chat, Brother Zulfaldi asking about the gharar yasir. Gharar yasir means the gharar in the unavoidable, right? Unavoidable gharar.
Yes.
Maybe you can explain some example.
Yes, unavoidable gharar is actually what we see. For example, you are trying to have some business and you are investing in some market, right? And the market you are investing, it is all halal kind of business you are investing in, but you are not sure about the situations. For example, right now, the pandemic this year, COVID-19, right? So it was a risk. It is a hidden risk, right? But business people still keep on investing, right? So there is a risk, but people still move forward with this risk. So this risk we cannot avoid. So we have to consider this risk and move forward, right? So these are the kinds of risks which we cannot avoid. For example, a life risk is there. So you are a driver and you are driving a vehicle, right? So there is a risk of accident, but you have to consider that risk and move forward, right?
Okay, maybe I can give the example, like if we buy a ticket of air flight ticket, it will be included insurance there. So insurance is gharar, but we cannot avoid the insurance when we buy the flight ticket. So I think it is still okay, right?
So that is one flight ticket. That is actually the regulatory requirement, right? You are buying that. So this is not actually the unavoidable gharar. I mean the gharar which is actually you cannot avoid in the normal business transactions, right? Or normal business activities. For example, you are trying to invest in certain sector, in manufacturing sector, right? And your target is that you will earn this much of profit on this much of turnover, right? but that turnover is not coming over there due to certain reasons, right? So there are the risks that you may not reach that target, right? But you still move forward. So that risk we call that unavoidable risk, right?
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Well, any other question from brothers or sisters from Facebook or YouTube? I think there is no other question. Okay, another question from Brother Zulfaldi. He says that the Islamic banking law came from the fiqh al-mu'amalah. So how do we make the rule which some might not existed in the past during the Prophet or during the Sahabah time?
So actually there is we have this Quran and Sunnah, but then we have ijtihad, right? Right. So it is actually a common practice which have been in the different issues, right? So what to do, right? So that is based on ijtihad, and different ulmas will sit and settle down, right? So what could be the possible solution for the particular problem, right?
Yes, that's right, sir. So ijtihad is also the source of the law after Quran and Sunnah.
Yes.
So
Yes.
we live in the ijtihad of ulama, right?
Yes.
Well, so I think there is no other question here in the chat room. So, well, thank you very much. So, I just have a little conclusion. Dr. Nissar has already explained the Islamic economic terms, especially in the haram terms, like types of riba, gharar, maisir, and haram product trading. And also, he also explained about the product and service classification to avoid such unlawful transaction in our daily dealing of economic dealing. So actually in the International Open University, especially in the Islamic studies, we already studied about the fiqh mu'amalah in the 4th semester with Dr. Muhammad Arwan Sahib Al-Madani, and later on in the 7th semester, the theory and the practice of economy will be deeper in the with Dr. Altijani Hussein, I think, if I'm not mistaken. So once again, thank you very much, Dr. Nissar Yatoo, for your attending this session. So
Jazakallah for inviting me for the session, and it was very interactive session and a good experience with you. So I hope we can continue in future, inshallah.
All right, we close with the doa kafaratul majlis. Subhanakallahumma bihamdika asyhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilaik. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. So I will give the time to student committee. Please go ahead to continue the session. For Dr. Nissar, you can leave the studio. Thank you, sir.
Jazakallah khair. Assalamu alaikum.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi.
Assalamualaikum, Ustaz Didi. Assalamualaikum.
Ya, Assalamualaikum. Saya mulai ya.
Ya, Ustaz Didi, terima kasih ini atas kesempatan yang diberikan. Buat teman-teman sekalian, tadi kita sudah mendengarkan sama-sama kuliah yang luar biasa buat kita ya, mendapatkan tausiah tentang Islamic banking. Ini sebetulnya Ustadz Didi ini merupakan alumni dari jurusan ekonomi perbankan juga ya, Ustadz Didi, kalau nggak salah?
Bukan. Anu dari teknik.
Oh, dari teknik.
Iya.
Oke. Cuman pengajar ekonomi ya, kalau nggak salah?
Betul. Mengajar Islamic Economic semester 7, alhamdulillah. Dan manajemen ya, manajemen.
Dari teknik nih ngajarnya manajemen ya, luar biasa nih.
Iya, karena teknik industri ya. Jadi teknik industri memang banyak berkecimpung dengan manajemen juga.
Alhamdulillah. Ya Ustadz, kali ini kita akan mempromosikan tentang jurusan yang ada di IOU juga. Ya, ini tentang Islamic Economic juga. Artinya ini kita akan memperkenalkan program IOU yang tadi bahasanya sudah dibahas oleh lecturer tadi. Baik, untuk mempersingkat waktu, saya persilahkan ke
Iya, bisa didengar ya? Ya, terima kasih kesempatannya Ustadz Didik dan Akhir Ahmad. Kita coba presentasi mengenai program IOU di salah satunya mengenai Islamic Finance. Jadi salah satu jurusan di IOU ada BSc in Islamic Finance, Banking and Finance, BSc IBA, gelaran nanti BSc IBE. Ya. Nah ini kalau kita lihat gelarnya, kemudian waktunya yang kita mesti dedikasikan juga biayanya. Degree-nya undergraduate S1, kemudian degree title-nya Bachelor of Science in Islamic Economic Banking Finance, BSc ASI, minimum required credit 144. Kemudian berapa lama? Kalau kita full time bisa 4 tahun. Kemudian dari sisi biaya, in average, range-nya dari $70 sampai $200 tergantung negaranya. Untuk developed country, low developed country sekitar $70 per semester. Meanwhile, buat medium developed country, $90 per semester. Ya, a bit overview. Kenapa ada program ini? Tadi mungkin sudah dijelaskan panjang lebar terkait mengenai riba, kemudian goror, dan lain-lainnya. Jadi program objektifnya adalah to understand and differentiate between the lawful and unlawful transaction. Kebetulan saya dulu ngambil ekonomi, majoring in accounting. Kalau saya lihat kurikulumnya cukup menarik, mencoba menggabungkan antara syariah dan ekonomi. Jadi bisa dapat dua-duanya. Kita bisa lihat di semester 1 pertama misalnya, kita belajar akidah. Saya sekarang di semester 3 IOU. Akidah kita belajar buku dari Bilal Phillips, Fundamental of Trade. Kemudian belajar Ethic of Seeking Knowledge. Ini buku dari Syekh Zaid Abu Bakar, bukunya Hilyah Thalibul Ilmi. Kemudian kita belajar fikih 101, ini kita belajar sejarah evolution fikih dari Dr. Bilal Phillips. Kemudian Islamic Management, dan karena ini juga ilmunya terkait dengan Islamic Banking and Finance, diajarkan juga tentang Principle of Economy, ekonomi makro dan mikro, kemudian Principle of Accounting. Ini di semester 1. Semester 2 lanjut belajar fikih 201 ini mengenai fikih ibadah, mulai dari sholat, wudhu, toharoh, kemudian sampai jenazah, kemudian sampai haji, umroh dan haji. Kemudian kita belajar Islamic Economic, Money and Banking, Financial Management, kemudian ada intro mengenai Islamic Finance, dan juga Professional Development. Jadi kurang lebih sama, mencoba menggabungkan antara ekonomi dan juga syariah, ilmu tentang agama ya. Ini, nah untuk semester 3 belajar bahasa Arabnya baru dimulai di semester 3. Kalau BA yang lain, saya ambil BAIS, itu mulai dari semester 1 belajar bahasa Arab. Tapi kalau untuk BSc Islamic Finance dan Banking ini mulai bahasa Arab mulai semester 3, Arabi 101. Buku yang dipakai adalah Durusul Lughah, Syekh Dr. Fi Abdul Rahim yang pengajar dari salah satu pengajar bahasa Arab non-native speaker di Saudi Arabia. Kemudian belajar fikih 202. Fikih 202 ini saya kurang tahu isinya. Kemudian fikih 401 ini belajar, tapi digabung juga fikih 202 digabung dengan fikih 401 mengenai criminal law. Jadi bedanya dengan BA yang program lain itu dia diurut fikih 101, kemudian 102, 201, 202. Tapi ini dia langsung lompat dia fikih 202 dan kemudian fikih 401. Belajar juga mengenai managerial accounting. Managerial accounting ini mengenai lebih ke manajemen accounting. Jadi lebih ke bagaimana kita memanage perusahaan, mengambil keputusan di dalam perusahaan, misalnya kalau ada kenaikan harga ataupun mungkin kalau bagaimana caranya buat cost efisiensi. Belajar juga mengenai managerial economic dan mengenai Islamic capital market. Jadi tetap digabung ya ilmu agamanya dan juga ilmu yang terkait dengan ekonomi dan banking. Semester 4 belajarnya ini ada Arabic 102, lanjutan dari Arabic 101, masih sama kitabnya Durusul Lughah. Belajar hadis 102, kemudian Islamic civilization, belajar investment and financial statement analysis, risk management, dan kemudian belajar international monetary economic. Ini kurikulum di semester 5, lanjut lagi Arabic 201, ini Durusul Lughah jilid kedua, hadis 101 mengenai usul hadis, fikih 202 belajar mengenai faraid, kemudian belajar organizational behavior, kemudian juga ada Islamic commercial law, and juga belajar accounting for Islamic financial institution. Ini di semester 5. Semester 6 lanjut belajar akidah 102. 102 ini kita belajar akidah, kitabnya pakai Lumatul Radiance of Faith karangan dari Ibnu Qudamah, disarah oleh Dr. Bilal Phillips. Kemudian fikih 102, ini fikih ibadah. Kemudian tafsir 101, usul tafsir, economic planning, belajar juga Islamic wealth management dan international finance. Ya, semester 7 kita belajar English 101, fikih 301, saya kurang tahu fikih 301 isinya apa. Kemudian corporate finance, ini mengenai capital budgeting, jadi kita belajar mengenai misalnya NPV atau mungkin payback period. Kemudian belajar juga statistik and econometric, Islamic financial market and institution and international management. Terakhir di semester 8 belajar behavioral finance. Jadi mencoba menggabungkan antara behavior, psikologi investor dengan finance. Kemudian belajar Islamic microfinance, cooperative banking, dan juga tesis di semester 8 ini. Ya, saya rasa itu yang bisa saya sampaikan. Saya kembalikan lagi ke Akhi Rahmat.
Terima kasih Fadli, penjelasannya luar biasa, jelas menurut saya ya. Buat rekan-rekan mungkin yang ingin bertanya lebih lanjut, tanya ke siapa? Akhi Fadli, coba tolong. Ya, untuk keterangan lebih lanjut untuk perkuliahan ini bisa langsung ke webnya IOU, bisa juga langsung ke IOU representatif di Indonesia dengan Ustadz Adi Wira. Beliau ada di nomor, sebentar saya share dulu. Ya, silakan kontak Ustadz Adi Wira untuk semua jurusan yang ada di IOU, tidak hanya untuk bahasa. Ini masalah belajar online ini banyak sekali tantangannya. Mungkin Ustadz Didi bisa bercerita sedikit banyaknya tentang bagaimana supaya kita belajar dengan hasil yang memuaskan, Ustaz Didi?
Ah,
Tip and triknya
ah,
mungkin ya.
ada pertanyaan yang lebih spesifik mungkin, sepertinya masih terlalu general ya. Bagaimana?
Atau mungkin
Mungkin
bagaimana mengatur waktu mungkin ya,
ya,
yang selama
bagaimana?
ini Ustaz Didi lakukan.
Oke, Tep. Baik. Saya join IOU sebetulnya tahun 2011 ya. Jadi masih awal-awal sekali IOU, Islamic Online University itu didirikan. Kalau nggak salah didirikan itu tahun 2009. Jadi sekitar 2 tahun jalan. Saya join 2011 waktu saya masih di luar negeri. Namun begitu 2012 saya kembali ke Indonesia, saya agak kesulitan dengan koneksi internet pada waktu itu, jadi saya tidak lanjutkan lagi. Sampai akhirnya saya bertemu Ustadz Adiwira di Jogja, itu pada 2015. Dan 2015, Alhamdulillah saat itu koneksi internet 3G sudah mulai banyak dan sudah mulai berkembang sehingga saya bisa melanjutkan. Jadi untuk waktu, alhamdulillah biasanya yang saya lakukan adalah, pertama adalah mendownload semua materi yang ada. Jadi termasuk audionya, jadi MP3-nya. MP3 itu saya download karena kan kita ada keterbatasan ya untuk video, karena video tidak bisa dibuka di Indonesia karena menggunakan portal berbasis Vimeo, yang dimana Vimeo itu diblok oleh Menkominfo. Dari Menkominfo itu mengeblok Vimeo, jadi ya teman-teman yang akan mengakses video biasanya menggunakan VPN. Memang VPN ini ibarat dua mata pisau ya, jadi di satu sisi dia ya tergantung orangnya lah yang menggunakan, karena bisa juga untuk digunakan untuk hal-hal yang haram yang lain gitu, hal-hal maksiat yang lainnya. Jadi
Ya, betul.
biasanya, jadi saya jarang sekali membuka video sebetulnya. Jadi saya lebih mendengarkan dari MP3-nya dimanapun saya berada, misalnya di dalam mobil atau di kendaraan umum. Itu saya manfaatkan waktunya untuk mendengarkan video dari HP misalnya, dan juga sambil mendengarkan audio tadi, sambil mendengarkan audio MP3 tadi, saya sambil buka modul PDF-nya, biasanya seperti itu. Nah, apabila sudah membuka modul dan juga mendengarkan, itu kan jadi ada dua metode belajar jadi satu ya. Jadi metode belajar secara audio dan secara visual gitu. Dan itu bagi saya lebih menangkap ya apa pemahamannya, apa yang dipelajari. Mungkin setiap orang beda-beda cara belajarnya, ada yang audio, ada yang visual, ada yang kinestetik gitu. Tapi saya dengan dua itu, audio dan visual, cukup mempermudah saya untuk memahami materi, dan akhirnya dilanjutkan dengan kuisnya, untuk mengerjakan kuis. Jadi setelah itu pasti masih ingat kan ya, kuis ini kan biasanya kan dari materi saja gitu, baik dari audio maupun dari PDF-nya. Sedangkan untuk yang lain, misalnya assignment atau tugas, ini yang biasanya agak berat. Beratnya apa? Karena kita sendiri mempunyai kebiasaan yang suka menunda-nunda. Ya, saya awal-awal juga, saya mengakui juga kebiasaan suka menunda-nunda assignment atau tugas ini sangat berat sekali. Jadi sebaiknya memang begitu ada assignment atau tugas, itu mulailah segera mengerjakan, karena ada waktu sekitar 2 bulan untuk dikumpulkan. Jadi manfaatkan waktu itu dengan baik, buat target seminggu ini saya harus mengerjakan apa, harus mencari data apa, harus mencari materi dari buku atau dari website mana, dan kemudian segera ditulis, karena tugas yang di BAIS dari S1 itu saya rasa masih ringan, saya nggak pakai sangat, masih ringan, karena hanya sekitar 1.000 sampai 1.500 kata. Sedangkan yang saya lakukan sekarang, saya lanjutkan ke MAIS, itu harus membuat paper yang mana harus sekitar 2.000 sampai 2.500 kata yang harus sesuai dengan standar apa, American Psychology Association ya, apa publication paper standar. Dan itu memang kalau tidak dilakukan dengan baik, tidak termanage dengan baik waktunya, apalagi menunda-nunda di akhir, itu sangat berat sekali. Jadi kita harus kuatkan tekad, niatkan dengan ikhlas dan manage waktu dengan baik. Insya Allah bisa dilakukan dengan baik nanti.
Dad, dulu waktu masuk itu sudah bahasa Indonesia atau bahasa English version, Dad?
Oh belum, jadi saya masih ikut, saya sampai akhir saya ikut kelas Inggris untuk BAIS-nya.
Oh, kelas English-nya. Memang belum ada Indonesianya?
Belum ada, 2011 belum ada. Setahu saya bahasa Indonesia itu baru mulai tahun 2016 ya mungkin ya, kalau tidak salah.
Iya.
Antum yang sekarang semester 8 ini yang baru mulai dari awal kan, as-sabiqunal awwalunnya BAIS bahasa.
Betul. Ini luar biasa ya, 2011 mungkin masih banyak yang pakai modem yang bunyi itu. Setelah mungkin GSM baru mengeluarkan 3G ya tadi ya.
Betul.
Perjuangannya luar biasa. Ini memang kebiasaan saya, termasuk saya tadi suka menunda-nunda tugas nih tadi. Alhamdulillah masukannya. Kita memang harus segera mengerjakan tugas-tugas yang diberikan supaya waktunya itu tidak berbarengan dengan ujian akhir ya tadi ya, atau dengan ujian setengah semester.
Biasanya untuk tugas itu pengumpulannya adalah di pertengahan setelah midterm ya. Anggap saja sekitar 3/4 jalan semester, 3/4 jalan. Biasanya seperti itu sih. Tidak mepet ke ujian akhir juga. Dan tolong dihindari untuk plagiarisme. Jadi saya sendiri beberapa kali mendapatkan mahasiswa-mahasiswa yang masih mengumpulkan tugasnya dengan standar plagiarisme yang tinggi. Karena di Indonesia di BAIS bahasa kita memang masih belum menggunakan software VeriSite ya. Kalau di BAIS English International itu ada VeriSite, yaitu semacam plagiarism checker, di mana di situ nanti akan sewaktu kita mengupload tugas, nanti akan otomatis dicek nilai atau skor plagiarismenya. Apabila melebihi 50%, maka langsung akan tertolak atau di grade 0. Standarnya adalah di bawah 20%. Namun di BAIS bahasa kita masih belum menggunakan. Namun tugas-tugas yang dikumpulkan di saya pada mata kuliah Islamic Management dan Islamic Economic, biasanya saya dengan mudah saja dengan Google search saja. Jadi dari tugas-tugas yang saya kumpulkan ini apabila saya copy paste ke Google search, nanti bisa kelihatan dia ngambil dari mana, gitu kan, ngambil dari mana, dan itu sangat dihindari di academic writing ya untuk plagiarisme. Ada cara-caranya untuk mengutip yang benar. Itu mungkin sudah diajarkan Ustadz Rizky Gumilar, Ustadz Abu Kunaiza di metodologi of research ya, metodologi penelitian.
Baik Ustadz, terima kasih nih untuk tip and triknya ya. Ustadz selesai berapa tahun tadi? Maaf, untuk BAIS.
Untuk BAIS, apabila tidak dihitung dengan cutinya, saya selesai 7 semester. 9 semester. Jadi nambah 1 semester ekstra saja.
Wah, tepat waktu banget ya tadi, luar biasa.
Alhamdulillah.
Mungkin dari rekan-rekan tidak ada di Facebook segala tidak ada pertanyaan tapi mungkin saya persilakan kepada rekan-rekan yang lain, Hana, Fadli, jika ada pertanyaan.
Sedikit pertanyaan Ustadz, saya juga kebetulan ikut yang BA Bahasa Inggris. Itu bagaimana membiasakan diri dengan istilah-istilah syariah yang terkait dengan bahasa Inggrisnya, atau mungkin ada kayak website khusus gitu yang kita bisa tonton atau apa, jadi terbiasa, karena memang istilah-istilahnya kadang-kadang asing, jadi kalau kita lihat di bahasa Indonesia beda, di bahasa Arab pun juga beda, dan kadang-kadang jadi bingung gitu. Ini sebenarnya lagi membicarakan tentang hal apa gitu.
Ya, salah satu tantangan pertama yang saya dapatkan mengikuti kelas BAIS di English itu memang istilah syariah, istilah-istilah Islami, tapi dalam bahasa Inggris ya. Yang mana sebetulnya kalau kita tahu bahasa Arabnya sebetulnya lebih mudah. Misalnya dalil. Dalil itu bahasa Arab, bahasa Indonesia sama ya. Tapi di bahasa Inggris ditulis evidence. Padahal evidence itu kalau di bahasa Indonesia kita biasanya translate bukti. Jadi bingung. Padahal kalau dalil aja kita sudah tahu. Misalnya lagi nation aja, nation. Changing nation through education. Itu adalah moto dari IOU. Sebetulnya nation ini adalah translate dari ummah. Ummah itu ya umat kan, umat Islam, umat Muslim. Tapi kalau kita translatekan secara letterlek, nation pasti jadinya bangsa. Jadi seolah-olah merubah bangsa melalui pendidikan. Padahal itu sebetulnya merubah umat melalui pendidikan. Yang benarnya translate-nya seperti itu. Jadi biasanya begini, Zulfadli, supaya memudahkan, antum bisa beli buku-buku teks yang sebetulnya itu adalah bahasa Indonesianya. Jadi misalnya gini, sebagian dari buku-buku yang ada di textbook yang ada di BAIS Inggris adalah translate dari buku-buku berbahasa Arab yang sebetulnya. Misalnya di fikih itu menggunakan buku A Summary of Islamic Jurisprudence, padahal itu adalah translate dari Mulakhas Al-Fiqhi, yang mana kita sebetulnya sudah ada buku translate Mulakhas Fiqhi dalam bahasa Indonesia. Nah, itu akan membantu. Misalnya di etiket menuntut ilmu, itu kan dari Syekh Abu Bakar Zaid itu Syarah Hilyatut Talabul Ilmi. Nah, itu kalau di bahasa Inggris kan memang ada sebagian kata-kata yang kita bingung. Padahal buku itu ada dalam bahasa Indonesia, terjemah bahasa Indonesia. Dulu saya pernah melis buku-buku textbook BAIS English yang sudah ada translate bahasa Indonesianya. Saya pernah berikan ke Ustadz Adiwira pada waktu itu. Jadi apabila dicari sebetulnya di toko buku itu beberapa textbook yang Inggris itu sudah ada bahasa Indonesianya. Mungkin bisa dicari nanti.
Ya.
Betul ya? Kesulitannya di situ ya.
Iya, jadi kalau bisa berarti ada dua panduan buku ya. Buku bahasa Inggrisnya, kemudian kalau ada di pasaran terjemahannya kita cari juga, jadi kita tahu padanannya gitu ya kira-kira Ustadz ya.
Iya, kira-kira seperti itu, insya Allah. Ya. Saya
Syukron,
juga ada buku-buku itu.
Ya.
Hana, Arisesa Hana, ada mau tanya atau gimana? Silakan. Hana.
Masih mute sepertinya.
Masih mute-nya. Di-unmute dulu,
Oke.
Baik, kalau gitu kita tutup saja acara ini. Terima kasih Ustaz Didik untuk tip and tricksnya dan masukannya kepada kita semua. Untuk Fadli juga dan Ahana, terima kasih untuk join bareng-bareng kita mengeroyok Ustaz Didi.
Barakallahu fikum.
Ya, mungkin kita kembali tutup acara ini dengan sama-sama membaca doa kafaratul majlis. Subhanakallahumma wa
bihamdika asyhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilaik.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.